What if we told you that 2 billion years ago, there was a huge disaster in space? Scientists have found that your Milky Way used to have a little sister. The Andromeda galaxy tore that sister apart and killed it. But even without this terrible event, our partner in the galaxy keeps surprising scientists. You may have already heard that the Milky Way and Andromeda will meet in 4 billion years. However, the most recent models show a very different picture, and the chances of us avoiding the collision are not bad at all. What? You live next door to a person who eats people. Before you start to wonder what your neighbor eats, let me make it clear that this only applies to your galactic neighborhood. That makes sense, since the galaxy next to us is 200,000 light-years across, twice as big as our own Milky Way. But when it comes to mass, predictions from experts are very different. Our galaxy has about 1.5 billion solar masses, but Andromeda is thought to have anywhere from 700 billion to 2.5 trillion solar masses. Based on the moves of fast Andromeda stars, the newest research suggests that the two groups of galaxies have about the same mass. However, the mass question is still debated. There is no longer any doubt, though, that Andromeda has physically gorged itself on a good chunk of its current mass by crashing into and then swallowing other galaxies many times over the course of history. This case of cosmic cannibalism was found by Eric Bell and Richard Duza from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. According to them, the experts discovered that the iron-rich stars in Andromeda's halo and a huge stream of stars in one of its smaller sister galaxies both came from the same place. Could these be what's left of a terrible galaxy crash that happened when Andromeda ate the sister galaxy to the Milky Way? Yes, that is really the answer to your question. That impact partner wasn't just any small dwarf galaxy, it was M32P, which is the third largest galaxy in its group, after Andromeda and the Milky Way. It is thought that this galaxy had about 25 billion solar masses. Duza said it was downright shocking that we didn't know about the Milky Way's sister galaxy for so long. We now know that M32P fell into Andromeda's gravitational pull 5 billion years ago, which set the stage for a huge disaster in the universe. After being pulled apart and broken up by gravity for 3 billion years, the third largest galaxy in the local group was totally destroyed and absorbed by Andromeda. Experts also came to the conclusion that the dwarf galaxy M32, which was being studied as a neighbor galaxy, had once been the main part of the destroyed structure. M32 is an interesting cosmic oddity. At first glance, it looks like a typical old spiral galaxy, but it has a huge number of young stars and is surprisingly small. As a result, the compact core of the galaxy mostly avoided damage during its collision with Andromeda. A whole new field of study was also made possible by studying the accident. Up until now, scientists thought that when two galaxies of this size collided, the bigger galaxy's stellar disk would always be thrown into chaos. But that wasn't the case with Andromeda. While M32P was being added, it was not forgotten. When the galaxy was eaten, it set off a huge wave of star formation that rebuilt about 20% of its stellar mass. Will the Milky Way not crash after all? In the end, the impact with M32P wasn't an unusual event for Andromeda, it was more like other times it had happened. The halo around our nearest galaxy is much bigger and more complicated than the Milky Way's. This means that it has likely been close to other galaxies more than once in the past. In this way, researchers found two very different groups of globular clusters in the edges of Andromeda that rotated at right angles to each other. Astronomers have come to the conclusion that Andromeda has already been through two big episodes of cannibalism. The first one might have happened up to 10 billion years ago, and the second one most likely happened a little more than 1 billion years ago. Now, the question that has to be asked is what will happen to the Milky Way when it hits Andromeda in 4 billion years. Or at least that's what we thought. In fact, the newest models show that the galaxies colliding is not nearly as likely as was once thought. How did this change in point of view happen? For a long time, Everyone was sure that our neighbor galaxy Andromeda was moving toward us at 266 ams and that their faraway halos were already touching. So the thought came up that one day, the two galaxies would join into a new elliptical galaxy, which is sometimes called Andromeda. This idea isn't really new. In 1912, American scientist Vestal Melvin Slipher found that the light from Andromeda had changed color to blue as it got closer. This led him to think that the galaxies might be colliding. But people who are against the idea that the Milky Way and Andromeda will collide say that the two galaxies are not alone in the universe, and that we shouldn't forget about the impact of other structures. This is where you should talk about the Large Magellanic Cloud and the Triangulum Galaxy. Even though their names make it sound like something else, they are galaxies. Also, the masses of the galaxies in the nearby group have been looked at again in more recent research. So, how do these things change the chance that the Milky Way and Andromeda will crash into each other? This question was looked at by a group of experts from the University of Helsinki. Observations from the Gaia and Hubble Space Telescopes were used. This data was put into a computer model, which then went through a number of potential outcomes. The results were really shocking. If the Milky Way and Andromeda were to move through space without any outside forces, they would likely crash into each other in about half of all possible situations. That, when we only look at the Triangulum Galaxy, the chance of a collision rises to 66%, because it will join with Andromeda before the big crash, bringing Andromeda even closer to Earth. Since it's moving away from the path where Andromeda and the Milky Way are supposed to crash into each other, it's likely to redirect our galaxy and stop the crash. Based on all of these factors, the experts came to the conclusion that the galaxies may not have to merge. The odds of them colliding are equal to each other. In other words, there is an equal chance that the accident will happen and that it will not. It looks like the galaxies won't join in about 4 billion years, as was thought before. This time it might take at least 8 billion years, or even longer. The experts, on the other hand, stress that the last word on Andromeda has not yet been spoken. There are still some questions about where the galaxies being studied are, how heavy they are, and how they are moving. To make better predictions, scientists are looking for the most up-to-date information from the Gaia Space Telescope, which was just recalibrated. These models should keep getting better as more research is done. Luckily, the merging of all the galaxies is going to take a lot longer than we can imagine. What about the thumb and the subscribe button coming together? That only lasts a blink of an eye. If you like and subscribe, you'll never miss another movie from us. We'll see you soon.